Welcome! In this video we will look at embedding HTML in a form with a cascading style sheet to improve the appearance with the PowerBasic Windows Compiler. We will also embed our cascading style sheet inside the executable. In our last video we created a PowerBasic application which could embed an HTML web page inside a form. In doing that, we could use it to display data from inside our application in a nice formatted mechanism. What we see on screen here is what we were left with at the end of the last video. What we're going to do today is we're going to use a cascading style sheet within this web form to display it with a better appearance. So, how do we do that? Well, first thing to look at is we're going to bring in a cascading style sheet as a demonstration. And this is our CSS file. Now, if we have a quick look at that, just open up with Notepad. A cascading style sheet can be used to impose formatting on your web page and keeping the code within your web page to a minimum. For example, the body style we've set here is for a particular background colour and for using a particular font. We also set the format of tables up, and there are a number of classes defined to help us display the information within that table. This will become more obvious when we actually start to use it. So if we look at our code first of all. In the routine which actually builds the report, we have at the top the tag for the HTML and the body. What we're going to do here is we're going to add a little to the top of the web page. So what we're going to add is a head section. And to the head section we're going to define our cascading style sheet. In the string which references this cascading style sheet, you would normally have it as a quote and the name of the style sheet. Now this has to be in quotes, so you can either put two quotes in, which basically escapes the quote character so that it appears as just one quote in the file, or you can use one of the reserved words to put it in so it's more obvious the fact that there's actually a double quote in there. So what this is doing here is it's putting in a reference to the demo CSS on the assumption that the demo CSS file is in the same folder as the web page which references it. Now in addition, we will just put in which closes off the head tag. Now, just by putting this simple bit in, if we run the program now, and click the Build a Report button, we will see that the format has already changed markedly. The font has actually changed, and the borders between the cells are now a nice straightforward single line. So already, just by adding this one small piece of text into the header, we've improved the look of the entire form. So, what can we do more? Well, if we look further down here, where we've actually got the part where we create each of the rows using the tr tag, what we're going to do here is treat the header line slightly differently from all the other lines. Now, we know that we're going from line 0, which is the header, to the end of the data we've got back from the file. So we can actually test to see which line we're actually on. So on lines which aren't the header line, we're just going to do the straightforward HTML. In the header line itself, we're going to reference as one of the classes, which is inside the Cascading Style Sheet. Like so. Now, if we run this now, and build a report, we'll see that the header line has indeed changed. It's now a blue background and white text, which improves the look of it. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to do alternate lines, different colours, to make it easier to read. And again in here, this is quite straightforward to do. In our else, we want to work out, are we on an odd or an even line? Now the mod command in PowerBasic is quite powerful for doing that. So basically if long R mod 2 returns a 0 remainder, then we're on an even line. So we want to use one of the other classes defined inside the Cascading Style Sheet. To mark this as an even band. And as you can probably guess, everything else is an odd band. So if we run that now, and build a report, we find that the report is now more visually appealing than it was when we finished the end of the last video. Now, all this depends upon the Cascading Style Sheet being in the same folder as the web page which we're actually creating. So in here, here's the report that actually gets created by our program, and there is our Cascading Style Sheet. Now, ideally, you want to conceal this report from the user and this Cascading Style Sheet as well. So how can we actually do that? Well, one thing we can do is we can actually write the report to the Windows temporary folder. This way the user doesn't get to see it, it doesn't clutter up the machine, and it means if you're running the executable from some shared folder which the user has only read-only access to, the program will still work. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new library. And what this new library is going to have in it is lots of useful little API calls for Windows. Now we'll just save that into our libraries folder, and we will go back to our libraries and we will save it in there. There we go. Now, in the Windows API routines which PowerBasic provides for you, there's a number of useful functions. And what we're going to do here is we're going to tap into one of those. So this new function is not going to take any parameters, it's just going to return the location of the Windows temporary directory into which we can write our file. Now this very simple function, calling the getTempPath function, which is referenced in the Windows API routines that PowerBasic themselves provide, will return the Windows temporary directory. So this function can be used within both the console compiler and the Windows compiler programs, so you'll find this is useful all the time. If we take a copy of that and go back to where the file is actually created, now when we call build report, we're passing in the location to where we want that file saved. So we want to go back to where build a report is actually called from, and there it is. So at the moment we're actually saving it into the path of the executable with report.html on the end. Now all we have to do is substitute the function for the temporary directory. So if we run this now, we haven't actually included our library yet. So let's go back up to where our libraries are defined. And we'll paste in the name of our library. And now we'll run it. And click on Build a Report. The program runs, but we find that we've lost all the formatting in our HTML file. The reason for that is, in the previous run, our Cascading Style Sheet was in the same folder as the HTML file and was referenced as such. And now that the HTML file is in the Windows temporary directory, the Cascading Style Sheet cannot be found. Therefore, it applies no formatting for you. What we need to do is to put the Cascading Style Sheet into the same folder as the HTML file, in other words, into the temporary folder. So we can do that inside the program, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to embed the Cascading Style Sheet actually inside the executable, which is not tricky to do. And what we can do is, when the program is actually compiled, we can actually take the Cascading Style Sheet and embed it into the application. We need one of the resource commands to do that, called rcdata. Now we need to give some unique number for the Cascading Style Sheet. So let's just pick 4000 for the sake of argument, and the name of our file, demo CSS. Now what this command actually does is, when you actually compile your program, it will take the demo CSS file and it will embed it inside the executable. Which is fine, but when the program runs, how do you get it out of the executable? Well, what we need to do is to look at where the report actually gets built. So there's our command that actually builds the report. So before we actually run the populate HTML, we will need to actually have the Cascading Style Sheet extracted from the executable and put into the temporary folder. So we'll need a little function to do that, and we'll call that save CSS. Now we want to tell it where to save it to, so we're going to use the function that gets our temporary directory again, and we add on the name of the file we wish to write that out to. Now, just in case there's some difficulty in actually writing to the temporary directory, we can do a test on it. And if for some reason we cannot write to the temporary directory for the CSS file, we will not populate the HTML. We'll display some message to the user. Right, so all we have to do now is to write this function. So let's put this one in here. So the purpose of this function is to extract the CSS file from the executable and dump it out to the temporary folder. So we'll need a couple of variables, and we might as well put some error trapping in just in case there's any problem. And this is where we use another resource command called resource $. And we're looking at the RC data inside the application, and you remember the number we referenced, it was 4000. Now that will take the resource that's referenced by 4000 and put it into this variable. And then what we want to do, we will get a file handle. We will open our file, which we've been passed in for output, and we will just basically print out to the file handle we've used the value that's in strcss with no carriage return line feed at the end. And assuming that works, we will return true. And on the assumption it doesn't work, we will return false. And then finally, before we leave the function, we will tidy up and close off the file handle. Right, okay. So the purpose of this function is to extract the CSS file from our application and dump it out to the folder passed in, which happens to be the temporary folder. So if we run this now, and there is our application, if we click build a report, and there we have it. Our Cascading Style Sheet has been extracted from the executable, it's been placed in the temporary folder, we've written our report to the temporary folder, which is referencing the Cascading Style Sheet and giving us our nicely formatted report. So that completes today's video. Thank you for watching.